Greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. With Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They're the Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company that stands for the same core values of faith, family, and freedom that you do, and they make a hella cup of coffee. So if you want to try them out, they've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American, and they put the fresh roast-on date right there on every bag because freshness is kind of their jam, so you know it is shipped to you within days of being roasted. Again, go to firstcup.com, use the code DACE to get a discount if you want to try it, or try it again. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE for the discount at firstcup.com. All right, coming up here on today's show, a new study says that political liberalism and church attendance are not congruent. We're going to look at this data and discuss whether we agree that this is true and then why or why not, depending on the perspective we take and why this is important. We will talk about that next hour. I'll also, for Pop Culture Tuesday, get into my last week. I had my top 10 movies of last year. We're going to talk about my top 10 most anticipated movies for this year. We'll do that for Pop Culture Tuesday. A little bit later on, there is a lawsuit out of California, the same people that care more about Marxist ideology than people during what is now looking to be the worst disaster. I'm not going to say natural disaster yet because I'm not entirely convinced of that, frankly. The worst disaster in American history in terms of expense. Those same people in that exact same worldview fired a kindergarten teacher for refusing to use her kindergarten students' pronouns and acknowledge their gender transmutilation. We'll talk to our good friend Brian Festa at We the Patriots USA about that at the bottom of the hour. His organization is involved in that landmark case. But before we get to all of that, let's get started, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by confirmation hearing season. Today began the confirmation hearings for some of President-elect Trump's cabinet nominations: Doug Burgum for Interior, Doug Collins for Veterans Affairs, and Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, whose opening statement was interrupted multiple times by left-wing crazies.
Pete, you are a misogynist. Not only that, you are a Christian Zionist.
Hegseth faced allegations right off the bat from ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Jack Reed. Here's how Hegseth responded in his opening statement.
As Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done.
Back in California, firefighters are still facing challenging conditions in their battle against the Los Angeles wildfires, with powerful winds forecast over the next 24 hours that could cause extreme fire behavior in the blazes or spark new fires. The Eaton and Palisades fires are likely the second and fourth most destructive fires in California history. Back in Washington, House Speaker Mike Johnson says any federal disaster relief to California should come with strings attached.
I think we've got to have a serious conversation about that. Obviously, there's been water resource mismanagement, forest management mistakes, all sorts of problems. And it does come down to leadership, and it appears to us that state and local leaders were derelict in their duty in many respects. So that's something that has to be factored in.
Ahead of the inauguration on Monday, U.S. Capitol Police Chief J. Thomas Menger says his agency has one major concern.
The biggest threat, I think, for all of us remains the lone actor. Just in the past week, while President Carter was lying in state, we had two lone actors show up at the Capitol, one trying to bring in knives and a machete, another one who was trying to, what I believe, to disrupt the proceedings. In completely unrelated news, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have sent out a bulletin warning the nation of copycat terror threats to that of the New Orleans terrorist. The agencies are warning of ISIS-inspired vehicular terrorist threats. They did not specify when or where. Joe Biden wants you to know he's got a really great record on the border.
Look, let's get something in mind about the border. When I became president, the numbers came way down.
Meanwhile, in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is convening a special session of the state's legislature for the sole purpose of beefing up immigration policies in that state ahead of Donald Trump's expected deportation program. DeSantis says if local officials don't get on board, heads will roll.
Now, the accountability is significant. If those duties are clear in law, I have the authority with respect to certain officials to suspend them from their office if they are neglecting their duties. And that's a authority that I have invoked when it's been appropriate in the past.
Nevertheless, Florida's Republican leadership in both chambers of that legislature are trying to pump the brakes on a special session, calling it, quote-unquote, premature. In other news, authorities in Indianapolis have charged a 55-year-old Texas man with felony stalking of Indiana Fever superstar and WNBA Rookie of the Year, Caitlin Clark. Michael Thomas Lewis is accused of repeated and continued harassment of the 22-year-old Clark beginning on December 16th. In one message, she said he had been driving by the Gainbridge Fieldhouse, one of the arenas where the Fever play home games, 3 times a day. In the UK, not even Charles Darwin is safe from his spiritual grandchildren's rage. Climate cultists painted over his grave at Westminster Abbey this week, screeching about the weather. And finally, this is a real headline at CNN. Sexual rehabilitation for injured Ukrainian soldiers has been largely overlooked, experts say. Cue the Sarah McLachlan.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLachlan. For just $5 a month, you can help a poor Ukrainian achieve an erection.
And that's what happened while we were away.
That is as serious of commentary as any of the other issues you covered there. I mean, morons abound. Morons abound. Let's get to it, shall we? Where to begin? Can I get, first of all, seeing Darwin's, as Aaron put it, his own grandchildren desecrate his grave, I'll allow it. I'm all for it. I mean, this is what he unleashed. This is the laws of sowing and reaping remain undefeated. You know why? Because the creator who embedded such laws is undefeated for all time. Amen. So in the end, cosmic justice in some way, shape, or form always gets meted out in this life or the next, and or in many cases the next. So I am totally fine with a bunch of people who are devotees of Darwin's own worldview desecrating his grave. I think it's, do not be deceived. God will not be mocked. A man will always reap what he sows. So shout out to them. We don't do, I can't remember if I ever have done a shout out to the climate cultists, but in this case, I'm in. I'm all for it.
Well, this is just a brief interlude. The next time somebody's standing over that grave, they're going to have an Islamic name, and it's going to be an entirely different kind of cultural takeover.
Now, that's true too. Yes. All right, I'm going to ask. Okay. I was going to let this go, but I'm not. I don't follow it, so I don't know. Okay. I'm genuinely asking. How many of Caitlin Clark's WNBA sisterhood of the traveling pants, you know where I'm going with this? After her scourging, her struggle session, all right? It was a self-administered scourge, by the way. I mean, she took the stage in like a cocktail dress, basically, and said, "I'm here for my scourging," all right? And whipped herself, beat her plowshare into a sword and impaled herself upon it on multiple occasions, all right? In order to genuflect to and to please the sisterhood of the traveling pants here, all right? How many of them at the Woke Nagging Basketball Association? I'm asking. How many of them have at least posted something, virtue signal, something somewhere, some show of solidarity? Especially here, I mean, an opportunity to point out that Caitlin Clark here is a victim of the patriarchy. I mean, how many of How many of her fellow players have publicly stood by her during this difficult time?
I thought you were going to say how many of her fellow WNBA players are jealous that they have a male stalker, that they don't have a male stalker.
Yikes. That would have been good too. But I'm just curious.
We have true equality here. Women's sports is every bit the joke as men's sports currently is. I mean, it's just there's no plumb line other than the dumbest possible thing. And the timeline for this thing must go back. These things overlap. So what I'm most curious, who the hell is advising Caitlin Clark? You were getting this kind of harassment. And yet you genuflected like you did. Can somebody intervene? Her parents, somebody. This is you owed the people. You've been harassed on all sides. The proper reaction in one case to make sure that this guy finds a hole and never gets out of it. Right. How about the same for all the people harassing you on the other side?
She wants their approval, Todd, or at the very least believes she needs it or needs to have it. She either wants it or needs to have it, or thinks she needs to have it.
She's still pretty young. Where are her parents? Where are the people around her that should be advising her?
You have to be willing to listen to that advice.
So everything there is clearly just as dumb as everything on the men's side. Sports increasingly is the thing that only amplifies the culture stupidity instead of rising above it.
You have to be willing to listen. She's in her 20s, and you got to be willing to listen to people. They don't have the authority anymore to just directly speak into your life when you're out on your own, especially making the kind of bank that she is. So you have to be willing to listen. And it's very clear she desperately wants the approval of those people. It's the only thing it's the only thing in her entire career, and we've seen her as up close and personal as anybody else in the country has where we live. The only thing she's given any quarter to since she first became a household name is her desire to have the approval of her peers here in the Spirit of the Age's favorite athletic league.
Well, that's also the NBA.
I would know because, like most Americans, I don't watch, so I don't know what goes on there.
That's also
someone told me the Pistons are like over my Pistons are like over 500. I haven't watched a game in like 5 years, so I didn't even know. I had no clue. I don't watch the NBA. I don't have a clue what goes on there. For many of the same reasons. It's just everything's a dunk or a 40-footer, and in between, they're tweeting out their racialist virtue signals in between possessions. It's a sport that's not for me, so I don't watch. It's not
a unique Caitlin Clark story. What could have been unique is her talent.
Correct.
And the zeitgeist, where this happens in sports. Where it's just like there's a moment and where nobody was paying attention, suddenly everybody is. There's a moment to do something unique and different. If only you will stand on the shoulder of giants. No, the opposite is happening. That's what's so sad and tragic.
All right. This is why I wasn't going to bring it up because I didn't want us to get too sidetracked, but I had to. I had to ask, where is the virtue signaling brigade whose approval she wants so badly, tweeting out and posting their sympathies? Because I've seen them post their sympathies for her foil, Angel Reese, demanding do not sexualize Angel Reese as she poses almost completely nude on Instagram. Okay, so there's that. All right, let's get to a story that is breaking right now and adds a corollary to an item in your montage, Aaron. Okay? So yesterday, Ron DeSantis opened essentially the new year in Florida by calling for a special session. The governor has the ability, the power to do that in many states, Florida being one of them, because they aren't going to meet again until later in the year. All right. Well, I think it's actually in the spring. So he wants to make sure. President Trump has been open. Just did an interview this morning, and he was asked, when are the deportations going to start? Immediately. Tom Homan's been anybody that, in national media that Tom Homan has been willing to talk to. That's his immigration czar. He's made it abundantly clear they intend to begin some variation of mass deportations. Okay. Well, of course, one state that it's not Texas or Arizona, but has more than its share of illegals too, that it's tried to do something about. So many of them, in fact, that the governor of Florida was sending them over to Martha's Vineyard and other places to get rid of them and put them in the communities in the states that demand the rest of us house them on their behalf, right? So he wants to make sure the state of Florida, Trump about to take over the presidency on Monday, he wants to make sure that the state of Florida has the infrastructure readily available to work alongside the new administration and implement said deportations. So he called a special session for the 27th, 1 week after Trump takes over. Two of the highest ranking Republicans in the Florida state legislature. So this is an important, I said this a lot when we first really started zeroing in on DeSantis in 21 and 22 on our show, watching what he was doing in Florida before any of us knew him, had met him, right? That this is like, this guy's like a political science class, because he's just violating. If Trump was a political, was a publicity class on violating all the tropes that you're told you're not allowed to say, things like Mexico is sending us their rapists and thugs, and you can't say these things and get elected, right? If Trump proved a proof of concept in real time that the so-called gatekeepers of what is and is not polite speech ultimately are emperors with no clothes. They have no power, right? When it came to actually to the aspect of the political process that includes the framing and shaping of agendas and legislation, DeSantis provided that in Florida. I mean, he violated all the orthodoxies of the GOP consultant class and took what had been the most expensive, controversial swing state, consequential swing state of the last 40 years and made it arguably the reddest state in the entire union in about a term and a half, right? And so we first got kind of turned on to watching this in 21 and 22 up close and personal on our show, especially coming out because he was helping to lead the charge, back to normalcy after the scamdemic too. So, what some of you I think forgot, because I heard this a lot last year. Well, what about that conservative movement? There is no conservative movement. There isn't one. Maybe there once was. I have no idea. No clue. I'm sure there once was one. Since I've been doing this, there has not been one. There's an industry. And then there have been some offshoot movements, the Tea Party movement, the MAGA movement. Okay, there have been some, the libertarian movement that under Ron Paul, the Ron Paul movement. There have been some offshoots trying to spark movements, and they have struggled to maintain longevity. Either because in the case of the Ron Paul movement, it's a self-limiting worldview. I mean, ultimately, libertarianism sounds great until you go up against real evil, and you recognize that if we both don't agree here on what is good and what is evil, then this won't work, because you're going to take the social compact and you're going to break it and then use that power against me that I then told myself I could never use if it ever came to me. It doesn't work. It works if you're like living in an era in the immediate generations after the Constitution was forged, and there's still some general, consensus about how to live. It would work then with an intact social compact. It doesn't work when one's not intact. And so people figured that out, and that thing kind of fizzled out. All right. The Tea Party thing just became rife with corruption. Too many people grifted, sold out, and ended up stillborning that thing just as it was about to hatch. All right. We're now going to find out what kind of long-lasting legs the MAGA movement has. And it has certainly had longer legs than any of its detractors thought it was going to, as we're here on the brink of Trump 2.0. But what about the conservative movement? There was no conservative movement. I kept saying this last year to some of you who didn't want to vote for Trump again, which you do that, you do you, but if you come at me and your reasons are dumb, I'm going to throat punch you. I can't inhabit dumb, I can't do that. If you're dishonest or dumb around me, I'm going to push back. It's a reflex action. It's impossible for me to tolerate it. I couldn't do so any more than I could fly off of the Empire State Building and land on both my feet on the wings of a dove. I couldn't do it. All right. And so I kept trying to make the case to you guys that DeSantis is basically the same thing as Trump, just his own variation. He's this Red Caesar. Remember, we had this conversation many times last year. Nothing good was going to happen in Florida unless he made it happen. There was no movement. Nothing was there. He's the one that moved it, just by the unique force of his will. He did so. Similar to the Trump presidency, everything that we liked that the Trump presidency did the first time around, Trump did it himself. Anytime it required any congressional input or anything else, with one exception, a tax cut, they did nothing. They could accomplish nothing. They could do nothing. And that's why the things like foreign policy were Trump's biggest success stories. And a lot of his domestic successes went away the first 10 minutes of the Biden presidency when he was still able to cohesively sign his name and recognize it. And he just issued a bunch of executive orders to undo Trump's executive orders. And much of the Trump presidency was wiped away 15 minutes after Joe Biden took over. And this is what we're going to need to do moving forward. We're going to have, I mean, in a godless society, your only two options are the total state or Red Caesar. Those are your only two options. We're in a godless society. That's where we are. So it'll be one or the other. We can't do any better than that. Well, in fact, we could do worse. You could actually be down to the total state and a blue Caesar and a bad Caesar. You could be down to the corrupt Roman Senate and Nero, the corrupt Roman Senate and Caligula. It can actually get worse than this in a godless society. But it can't get any better. It can get much worse, but it cannot get any better. The best we can do, we cannot live really in many respects by the Constitution as fully as we would like. We're not capable of it. We're not the moral and religious people John Adams talked about. Too much of the country doesn't want to live under that social compact. They broke it. So we would be right back to reining ourselves in under some form of tradition or decorum that the other half of the country is completely not abiding by, not being held accountable to, not being punished for defying, and then they get the power and punish us with their defiance at maximum punitiveness, which is basically, since the Democratic Party from Obama on. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. That's where we are. You can pretend differently, but you're really just guilty of the exact same projection we criticize the other side for, failing to see reality as it is. And the truth of the matter is, unless a handful of people like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis do it, nothing good will happen in the Republican Party. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing proactively good will occur. Nothing. And Florida just proved that yesterday. Its legislative leaders like, nah, we're good. We don't want to deport people who shouldn't be here or anything like that. We got other things going on like golf or something. Well, 5 minutes ago, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
And I hope other states follow suit, follow your lead, and do what you want to do. Oh, snap. Because I'm kind of thinking that maybe these Florida legislative leaders, and a lot of Republicans around the country, by the way, think that Trump really isn't serious about the stuff that he says he wants to do. And in fairness, there is evidence to support that claim. Trump has said a lot of things he wasn't serious about before. Not to mention, even if we didn't have a Trump, many of the Republicans you and I have elected have gotten away with saying they're for things they are not really for because they knew they were never going to have to be. They were never going to happen. Never. And now some of those things are going to happen. Now, if you listen to our good friend and colleague Daniel Horowitz's podcast, not enough of those things he would like, and he might even be right about that. But let me tell you, way more of these things are going to happen than most of these Republicans want to have happen. Way more. I mean, they were hoping Joni Ernst was going to take Pete Hegseth out for him so they didn't have to sit there and listen to Pete Hegseth talk about his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ at a DOD confirmation hearing. I mean, two things can be true at the same time. Daniel's criticisms could be largely correct. At the same token, we're way further over the rainbow than with this variation of Trump than the Republican Party even wants to contemplate. So they probably thought, no, you're not calling the shots here. You're a little brother. You're a lame duck anyway. So we good. Let's start. We're tired of getting pushed around by you. We're tired of having to vote for your culture war because of your 60% approval rating. and the fact you got the biggest electoral victory in Florida history, you're on your last legs, man. And we're going to kind of assume that we're going to get the same Trump we got the first few months of his first presidency, where Paul Ryan was basically given control of the domestic agenda. Not a damn thing happened. And then Trump just leg dropped him like Hulk Hogan, man, as one of his big supporters right off the top rope with this. Oh, snap. The big man is serious, at least about this. There is no movement. There is no opposition party. Unless a handful of people in positions of power do something good on the right, nothing good will happen. Two of those people are Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis is not that much different than Donald Trump. His personality is a lot different. But as a political figure, not really. They both are using the power of in DeSantis, it's more conviction than personality. And in Trump, it's more personality than conviction. The ratios and the percentages are different. But it goes through them. They make it happen, or nothing happens. Nothing happens. Even after all the successes in Florida, at the first thought that they were going to get away with, all right, fine, Trump's back in charge now. We have to put up with the ideological crusade of Ron DeSantis and his culture war, and it's back to just, Republican do-nothing stuff, and Trump will cover us by just giving us talking points and gin up the base so that we can just go back to cashing the corporatist check here. And then first thing this morning, Trump's like, good job, Ron. Every other red state should be following your lead right now. Oh, okay. So I guess we're going to have to work. I guess we're going to have to break a sweat. We're going to have to do some stuff. They don't want to do any of this, and they never did. They only did it for Ron DeSantis before because you gave Ron DeSantis a mandate. They're only going to do it for Donald Trump now because you gave Donald Trump a mandate. They're not going to do it for you. They hate you. Don't ever forget that. There isn't a movement. There's a few leaders who have inspired some things. But if they don't act and they don't lead, nothing will happen. If they don't do good, nothing good will occur. Nothing. Don't forget that. The best we can do, we're a worldview show. We're in a godless culture, folks. If you want to be pessimistic, we're in a post-Christian culture. You want to be optimistic, revival's just around the corner? Fine. We're in a pre-Christian culture. In either respects, that means post or pre, we're not in a what? Christian culture. So guess what we can't do? We can't govern ourselves. It's impossible for a non-Christian culture to govern itself, which is why there's been very few cultures that have ever successfully governed themselves. And the few that were able to, it's because at the time they were Christian cultures. It's not possible. Not possible otherwise. So the best we can do, and we could do way worse, but the best we can do is Red Caesar versus the total state. And that's what happened in Florida. DeSantis is not a movement. He's Red Caesar. There's no movement that DeSantis came out of. He's the movement. It's him. There's nothing else. And if he doesn't do it, it ain't happening. Same thing in Washington, D.C. with Trump. If he doesn't do it, it's not happening. Understand the signs of the times. Get ready. You're not principled. You're naive. You're analyzing a situation that doesn't exist. In a godless culture, the best we can do is the total state. The state is in whom we live and breathe. And then we counter with a Red Caesar. And it can only get worse from there. It can only get worse from there. If you can't abide within that paradigm, you're not a terrible person. But I'm telling you right now, political activism is not for you. You should consider full-time mission work, evangelism. Take your faith and go do something else with it. You're of no use here. Because you're operating within a paradigm that does not exist and cannot exist without revival. This is the best we can do. If it violates your conscience, cool. I don't blame you for that at all. plenty of times that I wonder whether it violates my own. But then there's something different for you to be doing, and this is not your thing, because this is where we are. Similar to, you might love the Lord, you're not sure you can pull the trigger on an enemy in another uniform, then guess what you shouldn't probably join, guys? The military, maybe? Probably that's not for you, right? Does it mean you're a terrible person? Does that mean you're unprincipled? No, it just means this is not for you. That's what it means. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, I've got a question for you. Are you looking to align your investments with your conservative values and take more control over your investment choices? Many investors don't realize that they can influence company policies such as DEI, CRT, ESG by exercising shareholder proxy voting and by reducing their investments in companies that don't share their conservative values. Well, Constitution Wealth helps clients make informed investment decisions that reflect their principles. Their team of investment professionals are passionate about helping you align your investments with your traditional values. And if you're ready to learn more about how to invest how your investments can better match your principles, you can visit constitutionwealth.com/blaze for a free consultation. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze, constitutionwealth.com/blaze. And Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Before considering their services, you should carefully review Constitution Wealth disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand all material risks, conflicts of interest, and fees. All investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. This is a paid endorsement. I am not a client of the firm. Good to talk to our good friend Brian Festa over at We the Patriots USA. He is involved in a case out of California that is really from the exact same worldview that has lent itself to the ongoing tragedy you are seeing there, when ultimately Marxist ideology places its priorities ahead of human dignity and worth. And when that occurs, you end up with mutilation of little kids. You end up with trillions of dollars of lost property because it's more important to not rake the dead leaves out of the forest and just provide all that extra kindling than it is to make sure that our citizens are rightly protected. And they're the same exact worldview manifesting themselves from all the same people. So, Brian, it's good to have you back here on the show, brother. How are you? Did we lose Brian?
Yeah, I just...
Okay. Well, all right. I did not anticipate that. So, here's the case Brian was coming on to talk about. All right. A California kindergarten teacher has filed a federal lawsuit against the Oakland Unified School District, alleging a violation of her First Amendment rights related to the gender transition of a 5-year-old student. Morella Ramirez alleges that she was fired from her job as a kindergarten teacher after the Oakland Unified School District forced her to refer to her 5-year-old female student as a male, and refused to honor her request for a religious accommodation. Ramirez informed the district that as a devout Catholic, she does not believe in gender transition and would not be using male pronouns when addressing the girl. The complaint, filed in the Northern District of California's U.S. District Court, alleges that the school violated Ramirez's First Amendment right to free speech by compelling her to engage in speech that violated her sincerely held religious beliefs, conditioning any accommodation on her promise to violate her religious beliefs, and then firing her when she did not comply. The lawsuit seeks monetary damages, including back pay, front pay, punitive damages, and compensatory damages. Ramirez has also filed a complaint of religious discrimination with the EEOC. This is a kindergartner. A kindergartner. Do I have to ask this? But I will. How would every previous generation of Americans, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, how would every previous generation of Americans have responded to a story like this? I'll answer. The parents would have been criminally charged. Child neglect, child abuse, criminally charged. The state probably takes their children away. We don't even get to the schools. I mean, we don't even get to the schools.
I think we have Brian now.
Do we have Brian? All right, let's try it one more time. Brian, do we have you now?
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. This is a plot. This is a plot from the enemy because it only happens when I'm on with you, Steve. Yeah. I could do 100 other interviews and I have no connection problems.
Oh, apparently the mice are eating at our cords. The mice here in the studio are eating at our cords. So I've already given the details of this case. Why did you decide to take this case, Brian?
Well, as you know, we are strong proponents of free speech and also freedom of religion. And that is at the heart of this case. Both of those things are at the heart of this case. Mirella Ramirez is a very devout Catholic, a person of faith, who absolutely refused to violate her conscience at the directive of her superiors at the Oakland Public Schools. This is happening all over the country. We just had an announcement about a week ago. Another case that settled for $450,000. You may have heard about it. A teacher in Ohio, in the Akron area, was awarded a $450,000 settlement. That's far too low, in my opinion, and unfortunately paid for by the taxpayers because of what these school districts are doing. We are marching forward to a trial in this case. There's no indications of a settlement from Oakland at this point. We're very early on, but we don't really want that. I won't speak for the client, of course, because it ultimately is her. It's at her discretion. But we want to set a legal precedent in California in the Ninth Circuit and hopefully at the Supreme Court of the United States that protects teachers. Because quite honestly, we think this case is one of the most important pieces of litigation for parental rights and for our schools, for education in the United States of America right now, because it will allow, if we are victorious, it will allow teachers who are on the front lines, who are alone with our children for upwards of 7-8 hours a day, to stand up and refuse to implement this kind of dangerous indoctrination, this curriculum, which is a radical leftist agenda. And as you correctly said, Steve, I did hear you before we were disconnected. These are the same policies that are allowing Los Angeles to burn right now because they're more concerned in California with gender ideology and protecting a 5-year-old's right to transition from a girl to a boy than they are in keeping the citizens of the state safe.
Well, they're also more interested in mutilating the child than they are in protecting her. They're also, she's 5. She can't gender transition. She cannot spell gender transition. She probably likes the taste of paste. Okay. They don't care about her.
Right. And they don't care about her. They don't care about Mirella's faith either. Even though the very same statute they use to terminate her, which is the statute they also use to terminate people for child abuse, also says that you can't discriminate against a person in the workplace in a public school on the basis of religious belief. But they just sort of forgot about that part. And they tried to compel her speech, which is an egregious violation. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that compelled speech by the government is a violation of the First Amendment's free speech clause. And yet these people, I don't know, they think they can get away with it, Steve. I don't know what they're thinking. They're brazen, they're arrogant, and they keep doing the same thing. And they're going to keep getting very, very bad results for them, good results for us, but we shouldn't even have to fight these battles. I was talking to someone the other day and they were saying, I can't believe that you even have to have a lawsuit like this. Like, what became of our society that we have to fight for a teacher's right not to participate in the gender transition of a 5-year-old. I mean, she loves her job. She's been a kindergarten teacher since 2007, approximately. She was nominated for Teacher of the Year at one point. The sweetest lady you'll meet, a very devout person of faith. And the students loved her. At one point, this student in question was dragged out of the classroom, Steve, crying because she didn't want to leave her beloved Mrs. Ramirez. She didn't want to leave her, but the school staff was pulling her out of the classroom because that was the accommodation they proposed at one point. So we'll just take the child away. Even though the child's there with all of her friends and loves her teacher, we're going to drag her from the classroom screaming and crying simply because we want to force this gender ideology on you.
It's probably not your job to answer this question, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask. What is the long-term remedy here? These worldviews cannot coexist. I mean, even if you win here, you can't. How do you coexist with this? How do you do this? How is it possible for these two worldviews to simultaneously and equally thrive in a culture? How is that possible?
I don't think it necessarily is possible, but that's because gender transition shouldn't even be a thing. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be something happening in schools. I mean, when you and I were growing up, we're not exactly the same age, but we're not that far apart in age. This would have been unheard of to even to
the parents would have been arrested. We wouldn't have even gotten to the schools. Parents would have been arrested. State would have taken the kid away, frankly, before we even got to this. All right. Hey, I'm going to have my 5-year-old gender mutilated. You'd have been arrested and the state would have taken the kid away. And this would be a matter of CPS. And it would have never even been a matter of school policy. A teacher would not be expected to be a stormtrooper, impresario, to impose this as a tool of the state. We wouldn't have even gotten to these sorts of legal questions. The legal question would have been whether the parents belong in a prison cell or not.
Right, exactly. And, free speech and freedom of religion, though, have been really the linchpins of our republic from the very beginning, from the start. That's why they're in the First Amendment. All right. It was at the top of the framers, the founders' minds to protect free speech and freedom of religion, but not to protect a child's right or a parent's right to gender transition a child. And that's what we're talking about. Those are the two opposing world views that you mentioned that are really at odds. And it's really a state-sponsored religion, which is why I believe this is also an Establishment Clause violation in the First Amendment. There's free exercise of religion, but the other clause pertaining to religion is the Establishment Clause. The state can't establish a state-sponsored religion and impose that on the people. Well, the religion that they're imposing, the set of beliefs that they're imposing on Morella and on all the children present in that classroom are that a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy, and we all have to acknowledge and affirm that, which are directly opposed to the teachings, the principles of Christianity, which says in Genesis, male and female created he them. And that was it, that there's male, there's female, and how God creates you is how you stay. And so they are basically trying to impose an opposite set of religious beliefs in the classroom. So it's not just a First Amendment free speech violation. It's not just a First Amendment free exercise of religion violation. It's a First Amendment Establishment Clause violation. And so I think this is going to be very interesting. And I actually hope that this case goes to the Supreme Court, because I hope we win, obviously, at every level. But whether we win or lose, I hope that we appeal it and it's taken up by the Supreme Court so we can get a decision for the entire nation. Because as you know, this happens everywhere. It happens in your home state, in Iowa. It happens in Ohio. It happens in Missouri. It happens in Texas. It happens in California. It happens even here in Idaho, where I am. So we need a decision for the entire country. But the Ninth Circuit would be a pretty good place to start, even if we just get a victory there, the largest circuit in the entire nation.
Well, and thankfully we've got organizations like yours on the front lines to fight those various battles. How can people learn more about your organization, Brian, and support it, more importantly, if they want to do that?
We the Patriots USA is our homepage. We have a fundraiser specifically for Morella. So, I mean, obviously, we always encourage general donations to our organization to keep the organization running, and we appreciate those. But we have one specifically for Morella. You'll see it right front and center at the top of the homepage at wethepatriotsusa.org. And you can click there, and all of those funds that are donated go directly to her lawsuit, nothing else. So if you want to donate to support her, we have a fundraiser. And Steve, as always, I appreciate you so much for shining a light on this in the darkness, as always, bringing these things to the forefront, because, you know, they would love for this to be buried. They never suspected that this kindergarten teacher was going to file a lawsuit and make national news. By the way, Riley Gaines has tweeted about this lawsuit,
Good.
And we've had Libs of TikTok has tweeted about it.
Nice.
So it's getting a lot of attention, and obviously we're very grateful that you've given us this time today, Steve.
Happy to do it. You guys do such great work, and they're a nonprofit, man. And so they only get to fight these battles, folks, because of support from people like you. All right. So if you want to make a tax-deductible donation today, wethepatriotsusa.org. You can learn more about this and the other cases they're fighting there as well. wethepatriotsusa.org. wethepatriotsusa.org. Thank you, Brian. God bless you, man.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, it's important that you said what you said at the top of the hour, because it has everything to do with this. The pushback against the trans movement, and he just laid out Riley Gaines, Moms for Liberty has obviously been involved in this. In terms of one particular issue, there has been something resembling a movement. But still, in the face of all of that, you just had the first trans lunatic elected to Congress right now. As they're being sworn in, it's been going viral the last couple of days. Grooming the kids.
Just flat out grooming kids.
See that? Yep. We still have way too many people on the sidelines on all this, which is why, Steve, where are dads for liberty? Where are the men? Where are the sheriffs saying, yeah, you're under arrest? Well, so, trust me, there's a law on the books to take care of this. You don't need to wait for the legislation or the court hearing. That's the thing. We keep waiting for the experts. If we have a society that has any sense of real interest in revival, it takes care of this. But the appetite still isn't there. It's just waiting for the people that it's their job to do. No, a republic, if you can keep it, a moral and religious people and no other. Get to work.
Yeah, you talk about the lack of a movement. Well, I could tell you maybe what an early indicator, a leading indicator that we might actually have an effective movement is when people like Brian Festa, launching lawsuits like he has launched, don't have to worry about funding. That would be a leading indicator that we actually have a movement. A leading indicator. Not the only indicator, but one of the first indicators. So, again, these fights are worth it. They are absolutely worth it. Even if you don't win 100% of them, you have to fight.
When we come back, more proof there's no such thing as a secular realm. Next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todders and Aaron McIntyre and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please, if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then also, if you wouldn't mind, if you love the show, let everyone know. If you listen to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you choose to podcast us from, Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, etc. And then hit subscribe. Oh, thanks to all of you that have done that for us. We appreciate them all. And then hit subscribe, or on iTunes, follow. That makes sure that every time we do a new episode, we're planning on 238 of them this year. How many have we done so far? This is episode 7, right? Okay. So 231 to go. So we hope that you do that, because that means every time we do one of those 230 episodes still to come, it shows up in your podcast feed this year every single time. And we appreciate all of you for doing that for us too. Also appreciate the work that our friends over at Voice of Judah Israel are doing there in the Holy Land. They want to take the gospel back to its birthplace, back to the place that gave it to the rest of us. Because, as the Apostle Paul declared, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to all who believes. And Voice of Judah Israel estimates 6.5 million Jews in Israel, maybe 9 million Israelis, when you count the non-Jews as well, have yet to hear the gospel of Messiah Yeshua, or Jesus. All right, so Voice of Judah Israel works in the heartland of Israel, sharing the powerful message of the gospel and the hope that comes with it. And then they also are the hands and feet of the gospel as well, not just with outreaches and evangelism campaigns. They do that. It's very important. But they're also there being there for charity and other means of support for the Israeli people. So if you want to heed the warning that the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. If you want to be one of those workers, you want to support the work that they do there, sharing the gospel, living the gospel, being the gospel there in Israel, visit VOJ, that's VOJ for Voice of Judah, VOJisrael.org/Steve. That's VOJisrael.org/Steve. Once again, VOJisrael.org/Steve. So we just had a conversation with an old friend of ours, Brian Festa from We the Patriots USA, and we first got connected with Brian because of the work that he was doing during COVID. And there were a lot of other people, including way bigger names, in the right of center legal advocacy sphere, who wanted nothing to do with it and wouldn't touch it. And the first two that I know of that went, or the first three that I know of that went all in on this, were Tom Renz, who's been on the show several times, Matt Staver at Liberty Counsel. He was really the one of the, I guess we'd call them old guard, traditional right of center legal advocacy organizations. He was really the first to go all in on COVID. Tom Renz and Brian Festa, we had no idea who these two men were. We got to know them because of their work on COVID, because they were willing to take up these fights against the scamdemic when many others ran. All right. And now Brian, with the scamdemic over, is branching out into a broader spectrum of issues, like the one we just talked about with the kindergarten teacher fired because she would not recognize that the parents of one of her kindergarten students wants to mutilate her and call it gender transition. And that brings me to this week's Idolatry or Not segment. Because what you just heard in the conversation we had with Brian Festa last hour is a confirmation of something we say on our show. There is no such thing as a secular realm. It doesn't exist. Someone will always rule. Something must always be worshipped. There's no secular realm. Anyone who claims so is either willfully ignorant to naive, or they're lying to you in the hopes that you will take your faith and set it aside so that they can then replace yours with their own. And Brian is exactly correct. That's what's going on in California classrooms. We took the God of the Bible out of the classrooms. Well, Steve, we just need to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, because they were doing a bang-up job with that, right? When they took God out of the classrooms.
Sure,
the proficiency standards went way up in America. We're all better off and smarter for knowing less of where we come from, right?
Exactly.
We're just killing it. Right, we don't have to have debates over things like H-1B visas and whether or not there's enough Americans, it's a scam, or enough Americans can actually do the jobs, because we're just dominating worldwide academic proficiency standards and geography Bs and math Bs and spelling Bs. Everybody takes, oh no, the Americans are here, look out, right? Wrong. They did it so that they could then put their God in instead, which is what they've done in the school district in Oakland. A God that says they aren't made male and female. You decide, even at 5. Even at 5, you can decide. Just straight up evil. There is no secular realm. It doesn't exist. In every human endeavor, every single one, and for all time, someone will rule, something will be worshipped. Period. End of sentence. Unavoidable. Iron law of the universe. Metaphysical certitude. Let's give you some more confirmation of this, shall we? I want to show you this data. And this comes courtesy of Ryan Burge, who is a research director for an organization called My Faith Counts. And if you look at this, this is fascinating. This is research they did in 2022 and 2023. Share of those who identify as politically liberal by race, along with their religious attendance. And you're going to notice something here. If you can't see it on your screen, if it's too small, in every single racial demographic, the very first field there for church attendance is never. And what you're going to see when you look there, every single time, those who never attend church are the most left-wing. In every racial demographic, every single one. 45% of whites say they never attend church. Liberals. Among those who say they are liberals and weekly attend, only 11%. Only 11%. And that 11% probably all go to very left-wing churches that make up the smallest amount of church attendance in America. You want to kill your church? Go woke and left-wing. Kills it every time. Blacks. 48% of those who identify as politically liberal never go to church. Biggest demographic by double digits. So it's amongst whites, there's a 19-point difference there. Amongst blacks, it's 10%. Amongst Hispanics, it's 13%. 48% never go to church, identify as politically liberal. Asians, 49%. Never go to church, identify as politically liberal. Plus 15 over the next category. Attend seldom. All others, 45% liberal, never attend church. And then look, the more they go to church, think about this, even consider how many of the cautionary tales about the American church we expose and discuss on this show. How rightfully concerned we are about the state of the church on this program. But then look at this data. Even a mediocre, soft bigotry of low expectations, I'm just here to sell Hawaiian shirts, pleated khakis, and sweater vest church. Even that is a bulwark culturally when you look at this data. Imagine what spirit-filled churches could accomplish. I can tell you, if you want to imagine, they're called constitutions and republics. And we the people in order to form a more perfect union. And we beat the Nazis and the Japs. I can tell you what it looks like. It looks like that. That's what it looks like. But even in the watered down version of the church we have today, the feckless, cowardly, systemically, I should say, because there's always a remnant, but even amongst the systemically feckless and cowardly church we have today, the more you go, the less left-wing you are. And that data trend shows up in every demographic. There's one little blip amongst Hispanics where, for whatever reason, there's a 2-point increase of liberalism amongst those who go monthly compared to yearly. But you know, the trend line with the more you attend goes in the same direction, other than that, in every other racial group. Those who attend weekly, only 11% of whites who attend church weekly. Are liberal. Only 23% of blacks who attend church weekly are liberal. Only 19% of Hispanics who attend church weekly, liberal. Only 16% of Asians who attend weekly, liberal. 15% of everybody else, liberal. Here's the thing. It's something we probably instinctively knew, right? Like if we didn't have this data and we just said, well, I think we all know. I mean, the less you go to church, the more left-wing you're going to be, right? And we just would have moved on as a conversation. We wouldn't have been fixated on it. But when you see this laid out like this, hey, listen, you may know when your loved one goes into a hospice, it's the Hotel California. It's a one-way trip, right? You check in anytime you like, can't ever leave. But you still are pretty devastated when the call comes in that today's the day, nevertheless, right?
Yeah.
You know how it's going to go. Might be a week, might be a month, might be 2 years. But you know, once they check in there one day, and you know from the moment you walk out of there after you check them in, that call is coming, but you're still devastated the day the call comes nevertheless. That's how I feel kind of about looking at this data. Like I knew this was true as someone who's done a ton of organization of particularly church people in my career. I knew that this was true. But to see it laid out vividly and confirmed like this, and to see the same trend line with more frequency of church attendance, and then to add in the context of the current state of the church. It is, to me, it is still striking, guys, to see this laid out like this. Before we move on, your immediate thoughts on seeing this as well.
Well, because just the act of going, that's what, putting down whatever you're doing and taking, this is a commandment. This is about the Sabbath. There's nothing about doctrine on there at all.
Right.
Not a single thing. It's a place called church. And taking that Sabbath and putting down all that you are, all that you think you are, surrendering it all just to God. That in and of itself does miraculous things. It changes who you are. And that's just the barest, just at a very, very base level. And it speaks to why we shouldn't just sit here as conservatives and point fingers. We should ask ourselves if we can apply it. Okay, we're not that never. We're going every week. Now but apply this to our own lives. Where are the never silos in our own life? Where are the issues that we do not let faith apply to? Where we don't acknowledge what you say, Steve? Everything is theology. Mm-hmm. It's because we don't look at things that way as conservatives that your intro monologue speaks to almost everything we're doing. That's why we don't have a movement, Steve, because we have all kinds of red light districts as conservatives, Republicans. Church doesn't go to that place in our lives or those places. So we need to apply this to ourselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. What does liberal actually mean? Okay, there's two different things we have to look at this from. What does liberal actually mean? Well, it used to mean being open-minded to new ideas, or if you want to define it in the political sense, you could individual rights, things of that nature. What liberal means these days, whether the people who identify as liberal, that we just discussed here, admit it themselves, is actually more capital P progressive. What is progressivism? We've defined this many times on the show. Progressivism, liberalism was we want government to allow people to do things that God says is wrong. Progressivism is basically ye be like God. We want the government to force people to do what God says is wrong. That's the new liberalism. So whether or not the people identifying as liberal admit that themselves, that's what they're actually meaning, because that's the faction that they're attached to. So when we go through this data, it's not surprising. It's actually intellectually consistent. It really is. The ones who are being inconsistent are the ones who are saying they go to church at all. Especially the ones who say they go to the 15, 14, 23%, 14%, 16% who say they go weekly. They're the biggest idiots of them all. Because when ye be like God, God is superfluous. Church is superfluous. Mass is superfluous. Why are you going there at all? What's the point? It's inconsistent. So this might be the least surprising data. Yeah, it is fascinating when it's displayed like this, but this is the least surprising news of all.
Now, on purpose, I kind of buried the lead here a little bit. Well, not the lead, one angle to this. This initial data only measures Protestant Christianity. But let's look at the same data. They've got data for other religious identities in America. Let's see what it says. All right. Catholics, 28% who never go to Mass identify as politically liberal, 28%. 18% who go to Mass weekly identify as liberal. LDS Mormon, 14% who never go to church identify as politically liberal. 10% who go to church weekly identify as politically liberal. The trend lines are not quite as stark, but the same so far. How about Judaism? Among Jews, 54% who never ever go to synagogue, go to temple, identify as liberal. 27% who go weekly do. And as much as we're concerned about the lack of orthodoxy within Christendom, it has collapsed all the more within Judaism. So to me, I think that number is even more stark. I mean, the reality is, unless you're going to the same synagogues that Daniel Horowitz and Josh Hammer types are going to, and they're a minority of a minority, chances are, if you go to most temples in America, like the one here in Des Moines, B'nai Jeshua, I guarantee you, as a guy who's sola scriptura, I have studied more of the law of Moses than almost any member of that synagogue has. So, to me, that number, it blows. I mean, I'm blown away by that, seeing that within Judaism. It halves. Because as much as you hear us complain about the Christian church, get Daniel going on what he thinks of Judaism sometime. All right? Yikes. So even in a watered down state of Judaism, the number is halved if you go to church weekly and voting liberal. All right, how about there's one more monotheistic religion here, Islam. 38% who never go on Friday nights claim to be liberal. 32% who go weekly do. So there's a drop, but very slight. What about non-monotheistic religions? Buddhists, 52% that never go to their church services identify as liberal. 45% who go weekly do. Hinduism, 43% who never go to church identify as politically liberal. 29%, so a 14-point drop, amongst those who go weekly identify as liberal. So to some extent, the trend line exists in every religiosity, even Buddhism, which is essentially atheism. Buddhists are really atheists. It's just atheism with a consciousness label slapped onto it, but even that even that, though, even though they're functionally atheists, philosophically, you are compelled to think beyond yourself still, nevertheless. See, that's the common thread here in all of these religiosities, even though they have dramatically different claims and premises, okay? The common thread is it requires you to think outside yourself, or prompts or provokes you to, at the very least, if you hear the message of it on a regular basis, than as opposed to if you do not. Todd, go ahead. You wanted to interject.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, atheists aren't by definition nihilists. That's the point you're making. I mean, they can be.
They can be.
But they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're too smart by half along this front. But this is where I'm just struck by the what I said before. You know, a lot of people have said the 10 Commandments. It's not just the Sabbath, but the 10 Commandments have reflected, well, that's just a codifying of common sense through the ages. This is pointing to the exact opposite. No, the common sense throughout all the ages is that, no, unless you itemize this stuff with some degree of otherworldly authority, you want to kill. You don't want to. Our natural state of man, this is proving, is godlessness. And it is interesting. I think the way you frame this, how, of course we know this on this show. It's why you've decided to make this show from the very beginning what it is in terms of worldview. Mm-hmm. But, we need this as a football conversations. That's part of the reason we do have a Sabbath and go to church all the time, to remind us of the this is a football conversations, so we don't get too smart by half like the atheists.
I'm looking at this data now broken down further by denomination. Within evangelicalism, I mean, this is something. For example, non-denominational evangelical. All right. If you don't go to church at all, never, you're at about 35% you vote liberal. If you go to church on a weekly basis, it's less than 10%. What's it look like when a denomination is gone? The ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Look at this trend line here. All right. 38% of ELCA Christians who never go to church identify as liberal. The number is almost 50% amongst those who go weekly. That just, again, they're responding to what they're being preached to there. A couple of things that you can draw from this. One, there is no such thing as a secular realm again. Never existed, never will exist, cannot exist. It's not possible. Someone's religion is getting preached. Everything is a theological debate. We're just debating who the theo is. Every single time. Someone will always rule. Something will always be worshipped. Everywhere, for all time. World without end. Amen. The other thing you can look at here when you look at this data across the board is that with the exception of a couple of recently lost denominations like the ELCA, beyond a couple of those exceptions, everywhere else, and regardless of religiosity, monotheist, polytheist, the more active you are in any form of philosophy that calls you to any kind of higher consciousness, awareness, or morality, you do not get more politically liberal. You just don't. You just don't get more politically liberal by adhering to that.
Which is so important because the left has advertised itself for a long time, and certainly the American Democrat Party, the party of the people. Yep. It's actually the party of the I. It's the most selfish worldview you can possibly have.
Absolutely. It's a demonic manifestation, basically. It is an entirely selfish enterprise. It's completely self-centered. It's ye be like God is literally the mission statement of the modern Democratic Party.
I think within denominations, there's clearly C.S. Lewis, one house, many rooms. That's reflected in all this. Well, within all those rooms, all of us must ask a question, because I think this is interesting. When we talk about church, and there's a lot of arguments online about this thing, well, the church is the people of God. But implied in all this is clearly a Sunday, a Sabbath, go to church, a gathering, a place, something we do together. It's not as ethereal. It can be in certain contexts, but the context is a setting aside, is separating sheep and goats. And what we do together there matters. And that needs to be reflected in our theology as well.
Aaron, you have any further thoughts before we run out of time here?
Amen to that. And yes, it is like just hearkening back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. It's intellectually inconsistent for a liberal, which we're really talking about a capital P progressive. It is intellectually inconsistent for them to go to church, unless, of course, they're trying to subvert the true church. That's the only reason why you would actually. I mean, I had the same thinking when I met people at the private Christian college that I went to that were liberal and complained about the expectations for living in Christian community. What are you talking about? I can't have girls in my dorms. I can't have boys in my dorm. What did you think you were doing here? What did you think you were getting into? But boy, howdy, when we actually talk about the people of God, as Todd was saying there, we've got the people who actually assent to that. We're not describing ourselves as progressives or anything like that. We've got issues too. We can sit here and complain all day long, or point out this fascinating, again, when you view it graphically like that, it is fascinating. You can sit here all day and opine about that. At the same time, if you assent, if you call yourself conservative, right-wing, Christian, God-fearing, what have you, and you're not actually going to church yourself, not getting involved yourself, here's your sign.
Amen to that. So the bottom line is, I mean, we just saw this in this last election. What was the number one issue Democrats promoted in this last election cycle nationwide? What was it? Kill your own kid. Did you guys see the Buddha's remarks on unfettered Islamic immigration last week, by the way?
Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama, yeah. No, we're not doing that. I wouldn't recommend that at all.
Laughed at the reporter.
Yeah, laughed at the white liberal reporter who suggested it. In fact, just laughed right in her face. No, I would definitely not be doing that, because if they're gonna want to bring their Islam to your culture, and that won't go well for you. So don't do that. He would know. Okay. But here's the thing. What the data clearly indicates. I mean, the Democratic Party just ran an entire election around. Let men who don't care about you blast off in your womb with their seed, fill it, and then kill your child. Let an entire political agenda based around men who don't care about you, using you for their own sexual gratification, and you staining your own soul by killing the child that was conceived in the process. They based an entire campaign around this. Is there anything more selfish than that entire message? The more you think about yourself and not others, the more likely you are to vote Democrat, regardless of what religion you identify with. And the more you think about others and are compelled to than yourself, the more likely you're not to. That'll preach. Hey folks, when it comes to gear that can handle anything, there's no better choice than UnderTac. Designed for and tested by an elite special forces team in Africa's harshest conditions, UnderTac is made to perform when it matters the most. Whether you're navigating tough terrain or just tackling your day, their underwear, socks, and shirts keep you dry, comfortable, and mission ready. Made from premium materials, 50% more moisture wicking than just your average everyday cotton, UnderTac offers tactical performance that goes beyond the basics. From the ultra comfortable boxer briefs to the American-made battle weave merino socks, you'll feel the difference. And don't forget the hoodies, the t-shirts, rugged enough for anything, yet comfortable enough for every day as well. Go to undertac.com. That's under TAC, under TAC. undertac.com and use code Steve20 for 20% off site-wide. In fact, I'm wearing their boxer briefs today. Todd, you were commenting how much you like those.
No, not at all. No such thing ever happened.
Not often you get Todd
that's
almost on the verge of speechlessness, but
I almost got a spit take out of you too, didn't I?
You sit on the throne of lies, Deace.
I am actually wearing their boxer briefs. The other part was a lie. That's true. Undertac.com, code Steve20 for 20% off site-wide. Code Steve20 for 20% off site-wide at undertac.com. Use the code Steve20 for 20% off site-wide at undertac.com. All right, so last week we opened the year on Pop Culture Tuesday with my top 10 movies of the previous year. I've never done this before, but we were just talking about it organically in the conversation last week, and I said, yeah, let me do this now. So we're going to discuss now my top 10 most anticipated movies for this year, for 2025, and why. All right, so we'll start at number 10, and with a movie that I'm probably never going to see. So why is Disney's live-action Snow White on my top 10 list of anticipated films? I am greatly anticipating the reaction to this film. The comments of Rachel Ziegler, the actress, a year ago, drew up such a poop storm that Disney delayed this film by a year after the fact. And
not only delayed it, the remade parts of it, at least.
Yeah, they did. So it's going to be fascinating. The trailer definitely emphasizes Gal Gadot as the villain, and she's one of the most liked actresses in America right now. But I'm never going to see the film, just not interested in it at all. And I'm past the age where my girls, well, I can't see Anna wanting to see Rachel Ziegler's take on this, but I could be wrong. But I'm interested in when this movie comes out in March because I just want to see the cultural reaction to it. I want to see if Disney had the stones to go ahead and say, let's wreck another franchise with a feminist take on Snow White, or if they took the year here, given the backlash, and got the message. That's why it's on my list.
Yeah, I agree. It would be on my list. Myself and my family will not race out to see it. I'm looking forward to it, but I know many people too, because they don't have such a filter, and their reaction to this, like, oh, that's
correct. It'll be fascinating.
Oh, that was garbage. Well, time to start asking questions. Why?
Yeah. All right, number 9 on my list is the first big easy for me to say, big budget blockbuster film of the year, Captain America: Brave New World. One of my favorite Marvel characters. Now, this is the Sam version, and he does take over for Steve Rogers in the comic books for a period of time as well. This is a movie that has undergone a lot of different rewrites and reshoots too. It was supposed to be out last year, and that's one of the reasons why we didn't get a Marvel movie all of last year. Well, Steve, we had Deadpool and Wolverine. It was put into the MCU now, but remember, that was a Fox property. I mean, like a Kevin Feige MCU kind of movie. We didn't get one last year because this movie got delayed. So this is the first opportunity. Disney wanted, essentially, we'll go ahead and let Fox put out Deadpool and Wolverine, and that's going to be like the break. And if you've ever seen the film, it's very profane, very crass. It's also like a 2-hour troll on how they ruin the MCU. There's all kinds of comments and jokes and riffs and rips about, how they destroyed the MCU. Clearly, they meant for that to be a palate cleanser. And now we're in the do-over phase. So they're bringing back the Russos again. Okay. We're now in the phase of, we're going to find out if they learned any lessons, or if Deadpool Wolverine was just a commercial break and, a bait and a switch, because this is the first movie now that will come out post that palate cleanser to show us, can they recapture their old formula or not?
I honestly have no interest in seeing it all. I won't see it until it's, on cable or whatever. And what they did is actually worse than the traditional Princess Disney properties. Like that. The proof of concept is so obvious. I mean, they spit in everybody's face on purpose.
Yeah.
And now they're just so like, well, do over, come back, and too many people will, because this is religion to people. And I got to be honest, I just resent the hell out of it. It's that what they did with the original ride was amazing. I was skeptical about it at first because I'm not just inherently a superhero geek. I just didn't think they pulled it off because they were serious about telling an important moral tale. And then they did the exact opposite, just to stick it to you. People shouldn't be going back to this movie either. They shouldn't.
Number 8 on my list.
Point of
Go
order.
ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
What's cable?
Yeah, I know. I know.
No, number 8 on my list. Happy Gilmore 2.
Sorry, they didn't have an updated poster.
Yeah, they
yet.
don't have that yet. They just announced it, actually. But Netflix, because Adam Sandler's doing a lot of stuff for Netflix these days. And one of the movies he's got coming out later this year is Happy Gilmore 2 later this year. So I'm there for that. This is the first one on the list. The first one, number 10, I won't see. Number 9, I am afraid to see. This is the first one on the list I am anxious to see. All right, I love the original. Okay, so we'll see if they can recapture the magic, 30 years later? It's been that long? It's been 30 years, actually. Yeah, about 30 years. Wow.
I doubt I will see this in the theaters. I will see it digitally, Aaron. Thank you for correcting my old manism there. But not for a different reason. I think Adam Sandler will understand his own homework assignment here. I think he respects the content. Yep. I'd be shocked if he butchers this.
Okay. Number 7, they are going to remake The Naked Gun.
Also didn't have a new poster for this either.
Yeah, but that's coming out later this year as well. Liam Neeson is the new Frank Drebin.
Oh, really?
Yes. Liam Neeson is Frank Drebin. All right.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's in the Leslie Nielsen role. Liam Neeson is. Yeah.
This terrifies me. I can't imagine modern day Hollywood understanding the assignment on this. I can't. If they do this right, it'll make what you said about Deadpool and Wolverine look like a PG movie.
Yes.
This should be so scathing about our current moment.
Yes.
I don't think they have it in them.
This should be Mike Judge, Office Space, Beavis and Butthead Do America level of idiocracy, level of profane, but completely prophetic commentary on the American culture. It should be that level if they do it right. I wholeheartedly agree. Yes.
I can't see it.
And one of the most quotable movies of our childhood is the first Naked Gun.
My buddies and I used to speak to each other in this language.
Yes. And every time a song came on the radio and one of us forgot the words, we're to pull an OJ and Leslie Nielsen and hum the national anthem like in the film. Yes. So this will be fascinating. Number 6. So I've been done with the zombie genre ever since Negan took out the baseball bat on Glenn and massacred him there. What was that, like 10 years ago or something? On The Walking Dead, I've been out of the entire zombie genre ever since. I turned off, never watched another episode of Walking Dead, moved on. I'm zombied out. But this movie, 28 days later,
I'm looking forward to this actually.
Is I think the best zombie movie that maybe's ever been made. And the trailer, you remember the trailer to this? No. Cillian Murphy's character wakes up and walks out of the hospital and just starts where's everybody at? And the streets of London are just completely empty. All right. So this is the sequel 28 years later, further into how humanity has adjusted to the zombie plague. And so I'm ready to be hurt again because of how much I love the original movie. So it's number 6 on my list.
No interest.
And this entire thing was shot on an iPhone.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. I forgot about that. Yeah. To give it kind of that grainy look of the original too. Yeah. Although today's iPhones are pretty much like 4K and not grainy. All right. Number 5. You guys know I love the old Universal monsters. Netflix is producing Frankenstein. Oscar Isaac plays Victor Frankenstein. And Guillermo del Toro it's his vision of Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's classic the modern day Prometheus or Frankenstein. All right, that comes out later this year on Netflix.
Speaking of Frankenstein, have you seen any of the promotional material for Epic Universe at Orlando?
Yes, those vacation days in October. That's where we're going. Is to that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So the Imagineers at Disney have their work cut out for them now. Those animatronics, especially Frankenstein, looks like CGI.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, Universal, seeing the opening with DeSantis' war with Disney, went to him and said, "Hey, we want to, expand. This is what they're doing with Epic Universe is the biggest expansion of an amusement park that's been done since like Disney World was built. With this Epic Universe that Universal Studios is doing.
All I'm seeing is remakes here. This is just more proof that like they mocked you, they resented you, and now they're just going to make remakes because they're counting on people's nostalgia to go pay them all the money. And then they're going to do it to you again.
It's probably going to work on me several times, just so you know. All right, number 4. This is considered to be the final movie in the series. Now there are still the spin-off series like Annabelle and The Nun and those, but the original series of The Conjuring, this is the final episode. It comes out in September. Last Rites. This has been commercially the most successful horror franchise in cinematic history, which is fascinating because it's also the one that probably quotes the Bible more than any cinematic horror franchise in American film history. So I'm looking forward to that coming up later this year.
I'm just seeing a terrible year in movies ahead. That's all I'm saying.
See, I actually think that all these. So now we're getting to the ones I think actually look pretty good. All right.
You need a good top 3.
All right, here we go. Number 3, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the last. And what is this, the 8th now? I think Tom Cruise, this will be the 8th one or the 9th one. And this is the last one. And it's part 2 from the part 1 that was out, I think, in 23. And this one was shot almost entirely on IMAX. Tom Cruise trying to do all of his own stunts, death-defying stunts, so it's number 3 on my list.
I give him a ton of credit. I'm a fan of this franchise. I will say it wasn't a bad movie. At least half of the franchise is better than this last movie.
Agreed. But the movie before that one was terrific. The movie, which one was it that Christopher Nolan gave us the first sneak peek of The Dark Knight Rises?
No, I don't
Before
remember.
that movie, that one was really good. There's been so many of them, I can't keep all the titles straight now. Okay. Number 2 on my list. My second favorite Marvel characters behind Captain America when I was a kid were the Fantastic Four. This movie's setup is something. This movie is going to open in another universe where it's a modern version of the 1960s. And we're going to see how the Fantastic Four comes into our universe. All right? And we're actually going to see all the original villains they fight in the comics, like Mole Man and all those guys are all going to be in here. All right? And we're going to get a real Galactus. If you guys probably don't remember, but when they had the first Fantastic Four series in the early 2000s, they did Galactus dirty, man. This is before the MCU. It's just a giant cloud. Galactus is one of the great comic book villains of all time. We're going to get a real Galactus this time. So I'm pretty pumped for this. Pedro Pascal is going to play Mr. Richards. The blonde from one of the more recent Mission Impossible films is playing Susan Storm. All right, Pedro Pascal is Reed Richards.
You have a problem with strong chicks in movies, the power chicks. I can't remember the word you used, but
girl boss. I'm done with girl boss stuff. Unless it's original source material.
Silver Surfer is a woman in this. Is that a problem?
No, because it's out of the comic books too.
Oh, is it? Okay, I don't know that.
It's out of the comic books as well. There's been multiple heralds of Galactus. So
Got it.
My guess is because of this is happening in another universe, they want to probably save the original Silver Surfer for something.
She's a really good actress. The gal I saw who's playing her, I can't remember her name, but she's been in some good stuff.
We don't have a lot of time to discuss number 1, but I think the choice is probably pretty anticlimactic. Look at that poster, man. Are you kidding me with that? That is one of the best movie posters I've ever seen. I mean, in terms of just capturing the entire spirit of the character and the message you want to send, I mean, that poster is something else. Okay. I started off on this very trepidatious, given James Gunn's background with irreverent material. The more he shows about the movie, the more he messages the movie, the more the more excited I am now. And my enthusiasm for this now is pretty much at a fever pitch. I cannot wait to see this film.
You just want to be hurt, don't you? You're like,
if this movie hurts
for
me,
a guy who does emotional hedges,
someone else, I'm getting hurt. So I'm hurting. I will end up hurting people if this movie hurts me. I will find people and I will hurt them. All right. All right, but this was my hero growing up. This was my preeminent masculine role model growing up. Superman, the motion picture, was kind of the first major blockbuster to go from the theater right at the dawn of the cable television era. And so, I watched the movie. I stopped counting it 231 times because it was on HBO like every day. I'd find a time to watch it like every day. I was the kid in the red towel as the cape growing up. Okay. This is my jam. This is my guy. This is the greatest American myth we've ever made, in my opinion. And the S shield is the most recognized pop culture emblem on the planet.
Are you surprised? There are a lot of people that are, especially after that trailer, that are just like, no, Henry Cavill is Superman. This is all wrong. I found that, there's a lot of energy
there's a
like that.
Zack Snyder cult, basically. But I will tell you, the interest in the film since the trailer has gone way up. This is the most viewed trailer in Warner Brothers history. It already surpassed all the views that all the trailers of Man of Steel had.
But is that interest or is that addiction?
That can be a very subjective scale. There might be people that are addicted to our show. We appreciate them. They're paying our bills, but I hear you. Now, I cannot wait for this. I was all last year. I'm like, oh boy. But I actually think James Gunn gets it. The way that he is choosing to message this, that he wants this to be a unifying thing, and the timing of it. Dick Donner, who was an atheist, doing Superman the motion picture right at a moment when he thought the culture was too cynical and needed something altruistic. Gunn is giving you kind of the same kind of messaging. So, yes, I'm ready to be hurt again. I am. I want to believe a man can fly again. Romans 8:28.